together for the late morning program with your host, Namra.
Sorry.
Why is it so funny? Hello, everyone. This is the late morning program with Namras. This is episode 23 with Jahnavi and JayaJagannath. Thanks, guys, for coming on. I appreciate it.
Thank
Thank you.
Nam.
This is our first kind of like group podcast, you could say, and
I've been waiting
super
for this moment for a long time.
Yeah, exactly. It's awesome. And what I was gonna say was, so what have you guys been up to? Why don't you start, JayaJagannath?
Well, what I've been up to is trying to the main thing I've been up to in recent times is getting a men's retreat going. For persons who follow me on social media, they may have seen that last year I spent a lot of time investing in kind of men's issues, particularly for myself and for other men, how we can navigate kind of like the pornified world in a more effective way where we can maintain integrity. And when I mean by pornified world, I don't just mean like porn, but I just mean like the music, the fashion, the memes, the language. And I think that has arrested a lot of men's ability to show up to the world in integrity. So I spent a lot of time last year investigating that, trying to find out the tools by which we can do that more effectively. I don't think Iskcon has been very good at dealing with that subject matter whatsoever. It's kind of like the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about.
Right.
So this year I had a very specific objective to create a retreat where we can start to have an honest conversation about it and discuss the tools by which that we can apply to live in integrity. So that's been one of the main things I've been doing in recent times. And I just got the retreat up and going. I have a landing page for it now.
Nice.
Thank you. It's called the page is called Now Die to Live.
Okay.
You know, this phrase "die to live" is one that's like really I've loved it for so many years. Kind of like dying to the shadow side of the self so you can live in your higher self.
Right.
And I had to put now because die to live was already taken. So I put the now in the front, and so people can check that out if they like. And that's been one creative endeavor, and then I've had a lot of other creative endeavors that I've been focusing on.
I like your Instagram posts where you have a picture of you and then like a quote that you've said. That's really cool. I like
a lot
that.
of engagement with the quotes recently. Like
Really?
I tried it
They're
out.
good.
They're really good. I like them. You haven't been doing them enough, though.
Huh?
You haven't been doing you only did a few, right?
No, I have about, I don't know, 9, 10, 12 of them up.
Oh,
But
really?
I only started 3 weeks ago.
Oh,
with
yeah,
it.
that's what I mean.
I
Yeah.
reached out to my Instagram and said, hey, guys, I'm going to try quotes. Are you guys into that?
Yeah.
And they were like, yeah. And I've been getting a lot of really good engagement.
Nice.
And
What's your handle or whatever on Instagram again?
Urban Sage Deliberates.
Urban Sage Deliberates. We'll put it in the comments and stuff.
So professional.
What have you been up to, Jahnavi?
Well, nothing
Big
as cool
things.
as that.
No, cooler.
No. Well, since last year, I was about a year and a half, I was based at the Bhakti Center. So that was sort of the kind of substance of my world for, that period of time. And then around November last year, for those last few months of the year, I was doing these big concerts, sort of mantra music.
Right.
We did Moscow, London, New York, and we did another event in LA.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting journey for me, something that I really never had a specific aspiration to curate and lead something like that. And it sort of led to a lot of other now new opportunities and just inspiration from many people wanting to expand. So I've been on a little incubation period of trying to decide, how do I navigate that myself? What feels right for me? And then also back in England, I've been doing more events. We just opened this Omnam restaurant in London, which has been another big project for
Really?
the UK
Wow.
devotees. So we've been doing some events there, and
What was the biggest concert?
the
Where was it?
audience wise,
Yeah, or Yeah, I guess
Well,
audience-wise.
in Moscow there was 900 people.
Wow.
But that was part of a larger event called Mantra Fest. So there were other artists there as well.
I see.
And then I think the biggest was London, which was 450, something like that. The audience.
New York was really nice. I liked it.
New York was really
I
nice.
enjoyed that one. Yeah.
The
Yeah,
church
Wasn't it?
was
Yeah.
amazing.
Beautiful location.
Yeah, that's right.
And yeah, it was. It's been sweet. It's been sort of like for me. Maybe it's wrong to say a culmination because it's not the end of something, but
Right.
I've been sort of active in that world of music, kirtan, and that sort of hybrid world of a sort of presentation and then sharing with people our tradition for just over a decade. So I've personally grown a lot through those experiences, and it's been an interesting expression that's definitely marking a maturing, at least for me, to sort of like be the front person of something like that and have
Yeah.
the courage to do it, because I didn't naturally see myself in that way. So
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. Do you ever feel like do you ever get criticized for anything like that?
sure I do.
Yes,
Yeah.
for everything.
Well,
I mean, I think nowadays anyone who's doing something new or different gets
Yeah.
criticized.
well, I mean, my family criticized me, which is always like,
Really?
just
Oh, in general.
good kind of criticism.
Oh, right. Yeah.
No, but I know, I'm aware of. I don't think I get too much that's like known to me. I know that there's certain like websites or articles and stuff like that,
yeah,
which I'm
right.
aware of, but they're sort of few and far between. I'm sure privately and in conversation people criticize me. I guess I've learned to understand that that's to be expected when you're trying to do anything that's remotely different, or you just don't fit people's expectation in some way. You get
Right.
criticized.
Yeah.
So thankfully I think most artists are quite sensitive people and it's difficult to take criticism. So thankfully I don't come up against it too much, but I'm anticipating it will only increase the more,
Yeah.
the more I
Do you ever get criticized for anything that you do?
Yes.
do. I
But I recently, I think the criticism has been less. Well, like for example, the last time I was here on the podcast, and we decided to tackle a very sensitive subject matter, and I was expecting
That was a great podcast, by the way.
I'm still getting a lot of great compliments
Yes.
from the devotee community, and I was actually, when we did the podcast, I was expecting a lot of backlash, or a lot more backlash,
Yeah.
and I felt that we got very little, and I've gotten a lot more support. We gotten like a lot of support for that.
Oh yeah.
So I guess like Johnny, I don't hear as much criticism as I had been accustomed to hearing about surrounding myself in years past. But yeah, I think the process of being creative in general, you have to either have the courage to be criticized and to hold that, or else you just end up not doing anything whatsoever. And for me, at least on a personal level, that's been, I think, the hardest part about trying anything new or trying to be more and more creative is
Where do you draw the line between when people criticize and then just for criticism's sake, or when they're trying to tell you like maybe what you're doing is not right? How do you balance those two things?
I think I don't. I just assume that you don't like me. I think that's the knee-jerk sort of ego reaction to things.
Right.
And I think especially in the modern technological world where you don't necessarily know someone, and therefore you don't know where they're coming from. And it's easy for people to kind of just say something to you without you knowing where they're coming from, without them establishing any relationship. And it's kind of hard to take that sort of seriously. So I guess if I had to draw the line, I've never thought about it, but if I had to draw the line, I would draw it in like, do I know you, and do I know you as a well-wisher?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And if I don't know you as a well-wisher, then it's kind of hard to, it's kind of hard to process that or hold that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's
How would you draw the line?
Yeah.
Well, I think there are people that I would know that they would be giving me constructive criticism, or because of my respect for them, or knowing what their life experience is, I would hear their words and try to really take it on board and process it like that. But I've become a bit more I've become a bit more specific about having boundaries over the years, because I tend to be quite open to people's comments and criticism, and try to find truth in everything that anyone would say. I think even if that sounds ludicrous, there must be some truth in it. Like I'm remembering a specific instance that I was leading kirtan in Mayapur in the Kirtan Mela, and a year later or so, I sort of by word of mouth, Chinese whispers, sort of got told by somebody that, people are saying that you're such a bad role model for the girls because you're sitting leading the kirtan and your head was uncovered and there's all these men around playing mridanga.
Right.
And at the time I got really affected because I felt like, yeah, maybe that's true. And I don't want to be, a bad role model. And I was thinking that there's always some truth. And I took some truth from it, and it made me very reflective about what I was doing at the time. However, I also later realized that there's just a lot of people who it's sort of their pastime to criticize things. And so you're better off being a little judicious in how you take it on board.
Yeah.
So
no one criticizes me. Because I don't do anything, really. My wife criticizes me. That's what she does. She's good at that. But I love her. Something we were talking about earlier was Iskcon Succession. I think that's a good topic because I don't think it's talked about so often.
It's maybe even a good transition point at this point, because you're mentioning your concert, I'm mentioning starting the men's retreat.
Right.
And we're taking kind of responsibility for the constituency of our society.
Exactly.
I'm looking at maybe a particular demographic of our society. You're also, just by doing what you're doing, you're letting people know that this is something that could be done to reach out to the greater world, as well as be personally nourishing for your own Christian consciousness.
Yeah.
So we're kind of taking responsibility for the future of our movement in that sense. But there is a little apprehension, because it's not like you're exactly getting guidance necessarily, or a baton handed out to you saying like, okay, now you can do this or this way. And of course, there are things like ILS, I think, was there recently in Mayapur.
I think it's happening right now.
Yeah, and there are programs like that, but maybe all of us don't neatly fit into I don't know how else to put this, but like an institutional mold of leadership. We have kind of a unique way of presenting things or being that doesn't fit neatly into the mold. So you don't maybe get that sort of invitation. Or you don't feel attracted to accept such an invitation, but you're like a natural leader because you're just doing things. And that's been kind of an interesting thing to kind of navigate, like kind of being a leader for a society where you don't have the baton handed off to you.
No one's conferred that upon you.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Said, now you're not gonna lead, but you notice, well, people are following what you're doing, and so
I don't think that they've. I could be wrong. I had this talk with Manoram Prabhu, a few weeks back, how I was kind of like not criticizing, but I was being like, there's no plan for succession in Iskcon regarding like involving the younger generation and stuff. And he said something to the point of like, we have to kind of make that plan, because the older group, they're kind of like they're dealing with what they're dealing with at the moment, which is a lot of things, and they're waiting for us to kind of say, okay, let's do this. But I don't necessarily agree with that so much, because I think that there needs to be a real presence in the, let's say, the GBC for younger people. I mean, everyone is 70 plus, 65 plus, and they're not involving anyone, but they're making an acronym where you can. There's what they call the Sabha.
yeah.
And it's like, to get into the Sabha, you have to be like 25 or younger, and you have to be able to go to Mayapur every year to twice a year or something. And and you get to make decisions or something like that. I feel like that's like a cop out or something. Like they kind of like, okay, you guys stay on the corner here and we'll give you your acronym and you can pretend that you are, you're important or something. But until an actual young person becomes a GBC member, I'm not going to believe it. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Would they want to? Do you think there are young people out there who would want to be a GBC?
I would do it. I would do it.
It's interesting that you bring this up because Nam and I had this conversation maybe in 2014 when we were in Vrindavan together.
Oh wow! Clearly one of his favorite topics.
It came up, and we were kind of saying the same thing that we're saying now, and we brought it to one particular GBC member, Sannyasi. You did specifically. And
oh yeah, that's right.
You remember that?
I remember that.
And you said, you guys are not handing off the baton now. So you kind of said it very straightforwardly.
Yeah.
And the sannyasi responded, bullshit.
Yeah.
He said, you guys are not stepping up.
Yes.
And it seems to me that it's probably a balance of both. That on the one hand, there is maybe a difficulty in relinquishing a certain identity that has been your identity for so many years.
Yeah.
And the identity of leadership of GBC or whatever it might be. And oftentimes when I have brought this up to senior members, and it's always the same response, which is I've always been uncomfortable with it. The burden of love, for serving Srila Prabhupada's movement. And I'm like, aren't there other ways to love him? Like handing off the baton to the next generation who will be forced to continue the movement without proper guidance if we don't get it now.
Right.
And so that's always been kind of the response, like, why aren't you relinquishing a certain position? Like, I'm not saying this as a judgment. I don't know what they're going through and what's the whole process by which someone is staying in a particular position. Right. I'm just saying what it communicates sometimes. And I would like to see, like, the example of like, okay, we're letting go and now we're absorbing in bhajan because death is coming. Yeah. And that example, like, even if you are totally fixed in your devotions to Prabhupada and it really is coming from the place of a labor of love, what is the precedent is it going to set for the next generation who may not have that same level of deep connection to Prabhupada? Then we're in it because we like the position. And then that becomes the standard, in subsequent generations. So I would have like in my mind, I think it would be nice to see, like, this is a time for letting go. Like the Pandavas retire early. Timely. Or timely, right?
Timely, yeah.
Timely. They retire timely, like I want to see that example. Like there is a time of life for letting go and just absorbing in bhajan before it's too late. That's on the one hand. And then on the other hand, maybe generation.
There's the precedent of Srila Prabhupada who he served till the very last, even if we are not him, but there's that impression of following.
Right. Die on the battlefield.
Right. So this
and
is...
he says
this, right. That one has also been very confusing because it's like, okay.
Well, die preaching. We should die preaching. But not die being a GBC member.
Well, for me, that's always communicated like, well, Prabhupada was a fully self-realized soul and it's his prerogative. When you're on that level of Krishna consciousness, then you're in a place of full freedom by strength of your devotion, which is beyond this world. If you're in that space, kudos, and you still have an example to set for the next generation who may not be in that particular place. Yeah. And it just seems to me I'm trying not to say this as a judgment, just as my kind of contemplations about it. It seems to me that it would be reasonable to set a precedent that unless you're really on that platform of encounter with yourself and God, there is a time for letting go of things. I particularly chapter 15 of the first canto, Yudhishthira, I think, is the first to leave, and then later the Pandavas follow. So Draupadi is just like, all right. So she leaves after, and when describing the Pandavas' departure, it is mentioned that the Pandavas knew that there was no end to the duties that were required of their position. And so at a certain point, they just let go of them because they realized there was no end to such duties, actually. So it was just a point of letting go. And it seems like it is an important precedent if you're trying to see to the growth of a society. Like there is a time for letting go and absorbing yourself in bhajan, in Krishna consciousness, like 100%. And not with all the anarthas of an institutional constituency, which is usually appears to be the work of the GBC. I remember one GBC mentioning, we asked them, how are the GBC meetings? And this GBC mentioned it's like chewing sawdust with sand in it or something like that. And I was just like, yikes, you know. And anyway, so that's on the one hand. I'm sorry for talking so long.
No, that's
But on
okay.
the other hand,
We're all ears.
on the other hand, what's going on with our generation? Like, are we really stepping up to? Do we really want that leadership? Like, you've stepped forward. Yeah, I'm ready to do it. So, okay, great. That's awesome. That's beautiful. That's one person. How many of our generation is prepared for that level of responsibility? And this goes back into some of the work that I've been trying to do with guys. When we're like so much arrested by the modern world, our willpower, our will to even be better for ourselves, what to speak of a whole institution, the will to be better for ourselves is so much arrested by the modern world that if someone were to come up to me when I'm in that kind of demoralized state and say, are you ready to be the GBC? I'm like, hell nah.
Yeah.
I'm struggling with my integrity right now, and I'm demoralized.
Yeah.
And I'm not able to talk about that with anybody right now.
Right.
So I'm not ready. So there, I like I'm looking at the next generation, and there is a problem with that. Thanks to iPhones, there's a huge problem on that level. So there may be we're not stepping up also. And so to that GBC's point in Brindavan, he had a point. Like, he, calling us out in that way. I don't know. So sorry for going on for so long.
No. I agree with you. But, I had this conversation with Jahnavi yesterday that sometimes I feel so distant from the society that it's like, it's not, I can't relate anymore with it in the sense of trying to, if someone asked me, do you want to be a GBC and what, and I'm like, I would be like, for like, how would that fit into my life right now when it's like so divorced from it just in my area? I feel like it's there's not much going on, so it's like, what would I do? And I don't know, do you remember what we were talking about? It was a kind of like you, for example,
disconnect.
there's a disconnect there. I mean, you, for example, you're doing your own thing, you're doing your own thing type of thing, like, so where would you fit into that if someone came to you and said, hey, can you help run Iskcon? Well, people are leaving, and so.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know, like, for a person like me, I think the trajectory of my life has shown me to be someone who's involved with primarily art and communication. And so I think there's a role for me to play, but I'm not necessarily going to be in that template of a manager or this sort of like president sort of role. I think I have maybe a role to play in sort of trying to inspire people. I often get asked to do more with the younger generation to sort of be a linking point, and that's something that it does weigh on my mind, because I think, sort of to your point of like, we're having to work out our own selves in the meantime. I think I've been on my own journey of self-discovery and trying to find my strength in my own conviction and faith in this path of bhakti, but at the same time looking back and seeing, well, I wouldn't have been able to progress on that journey without the input of so many people who, as a young person, they were feeding into me. And then I look at those that are younger than me and see that they don't always have that, with the exception of people like Manoram, who have these programs like the youth bus tours. So it weighs heavily on my mind, and I always feel a little torn, because on the one hand, I'm engaged with doing things that connect with the broader public, yet I'm aware that it's sort of equally important to be feeding back into this society. And I think I have just a little I don't know, at least for me personally, I can't speak for anyone else, but growing up in Iskcon and having to come out of that early, very sheltered childhood, which is quite, for me, it was very traumatic coming out of that and coming out into the wider world. I struggled for probably my whole teen years to like process that, and very difficult. So I almost have like a pushback to be looking back inward to the society. I feel like it's sort of like now I have to be always seeking that, how to bridge the two worlds together. And so the idea of like, okay, let me have a position within the society, or let me be, the minister of artistic affairs. I'm just like, no, I have to be broader than that. I have to keep broadening out. But I'm a little troubled by that, because it makes me, well, who's going to be the people that are, what is the relevance of an institution? An institution needs leadership and people within it to be like, well, I'm not, yes, there's, outreach and different kinds of activities going on, but I'm here, and this is my local temple. I'm invested in nurturing this community. This is my world, and this is what I'm doing.
I think the previous generation had this kind of focus that the new generation doesn't have, in the sense everyone was Prabhupada's disciple. And the idea was very simple. We pushing on the movement. But now it's become so big and so there's such a spectrum.
It's variegated
Yeah.
in sort of interests and motivations and
Right.
just activities.
I remember one sannyasi when I first joined the movement giving class in Chicago and said, very funny, Maharaj. And he said, you may find this surprising that everyone has not joined this movement for pure devotional service. And I never forgot that, because it's true. Akama sarva kama va moksha kama udaritihi tivena bhakti yogena yajeta purusham param. That we don't always we kind of take it for granted, because we are a movement that preaches pure devotional service, that its constituency is actually interested in pure devotional service, or at least moving in that way, but they're not. There's again a variety of interest, and so it is hard to understand even maybe this type of service you would do when you're dealing with so many varieties of desires and people within the institution.
Yeah, I mean, if I kind of see the viewpoint of the first generation to, what that Maharaj said, like, you guys aren't stepping up,
But I was just having a thought about, and maybe it's just a semantic thing, but we were talking about relinquishing a position, and I find that word carries a connotation of like there being some sort of struggle, like okay, I relinquish.
And I think
you can have it.
And I think I intended it in that way also.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Which
Very interesting.
Which I think is not the only way that it could be. It doesn't have to be like, okay, let us in, banging on the door.
Yeah.
But the holistic way I think about it is that I'd been told by a friend once that when you have the moment you get any position, immediately you should be looking for your replacement, and because that day is going to come.
Wow.
And the way that the transition will be smooth is if you're already looking for that person and you're already training them up. I think I was talking to another person that works in the corporate world, and he said actually that's sort of a common practice, because it's a healthy approach. So sometimes I look and think, it's frightening sometimes, because there's so many devotees who they're so rich in their experience, their depth, their wisdom, their specific skills. Like something that I'm very conscious of at different times is like the specific skills that certain people have, which don't appear to be getting passed on at all. Like, people that have been for decades making outfits for the deities, which is now getting outsourced mostly to just the craft people in India.
Right.
But it used to be that in every temple there was a sewing room, and they would hand make, which is a very deep devotional creation that engages people in the community. It's something, and those skills are not really people are not really being trained or passed on, with the exception of a few little micro pockets of places. And so I would sort of, I mean, I don't really have I don't strongly hold this viewpoint in one side or the other, but I'd maybe put it back to those senior people and say, well, if you were looking for your replacement, who do you see? Is there anyone you point out and say, okay, I think you could do this. Can we talk? Like, I remember Balabhadra Prabhu, who does the cow protection.
Iskcon,
Yeah, I think at one point he was reaching out for people. He wanted to train them up about how to actually work with the cows, farming practice and all these things, because it's just a necessity. It has to happen.
Yeah.
Just to your point, both those points, but it's maybe an aside, but it's making me think about how you had like a family that did something and they had children, and it was very clear that you were also going to do the same thing, because this is a very viable contribution to the society, and we want to maintain the society and posterity. And I think this is why you get concepts in the Bhagavad Gita like Varna Sankara being so detrimental to the healthy upkeep of a society, because you need these different families with these different skills who are going to keep the society going.
Totally.
And if this, the mixture of psychology happens and the kid's like, well, maybe I'm like this, maybe I'm like you talk to any of the young guys today, they don't know what they are, the young guys, we're like, well, I don't know, maybe I can do this, maybe I can do that. Right, completely bewildered.
Yeah.
And one of my realizations about the modern world that I was recently sharing with my friends, I was like, listen, everything in the material world is a trade-off. If you get this, you can't have this. If you want this, you can't have the other thing. And the trade-off you get in this world for more freedom, so you don't have to adhere to the family lineage and all of that. So the trade-off you get for more freedom is you get to be bewildered for most of your life. And then by the time you figure anything out, you're like 40, 50 years old, and it's time to die, Right. And then the trade-off with the other system is you have a lot less social freedom, but you have a certain clarity about what direction you're going to be going in life, in terms of the craft that you're going to learn, in terms of the contribution you're going to make to society. Now, I don't want to paint like a romantic picture of like that's all fine and dandy, but that's the trade-off. The trade-off. And I just experiencing within myself, like I grew up in this world where we have a lot of social freedoms, so-called, at least it appears to be so. That could be another sort of discussion, but what do we get for that? We get to be bewildered. Like if I were to ask you, do you feel bewildered most of the time? What would be the answer? It's like, yeah, pretty bewildered about where I'm going in my. I'm just taking some job to make money because I have to maintain my family, but it doesn't really give fulfillment.
Right.
I'm not happy with it. So we're basically bewildered, and we'll probably. And we'll probably live like this until we're like 50 or 60 years old. You're like, you know what? I'm gonna just chant Hare Krishna and die.
I know.
So so just to that point, it made me appreciate why that system was there. Like, okay, we're the family that crafts clothes for the deities, and that's what you're gonna be doing for your life. It's like a certain clarity.
Yeah.
And just to the relinquish point, there should be like a leader like, okay, I'm going to put you under my train you, and I see that you're the one who can do this, and are you interested, and so on. But I read this book, and I don't like to promote other literatures, but anyway, a particular devotee recommended this book to me. I really liked it. Richard Rohr, Falling Upward. So he talks about...
Oh, yeah, you talked about this ages ago.
Because after I read it, I found it so inspiring. And the reason I found it inspiring because I thought he kind of pinpointed something I was seeing in Iskcon for a long time. The tagline of the book is something like the two halves of life. Anyway, so one half of life is kind of like the establishing of your ego in this world and how you're going to operate. And then the second half of life is kind of dismantling of that ego for deeper communion with God. And he says what ends up happening in a lot of spiritual organizations is they try to do the second half first. And what ends up happening...
I missed the second half.
The second half is breaking the ego down so you can commune with God in a deeper way.
Right.
So they try to do the second half first. And what ends up, they end up being like 30 and 40. And he says what they end up doing is that within the organization, they're trying to do the second half first, but they end up doing the first half within their spiritual organization. And then therefore they become so deeply entangled in that particular identity with the organization that when it's time to actually move to the second half of life, they're unable to do so.
Wow.
And they're supported by the concept that I'm doing this for God.
Wow.
And therefore
That's
they become
powerful.
completely bound by that. And I remember when I was reading the book, I was like, where you have like those kind of like a light bulb moment and then the mirror shine in front of your face. You're like, oh my God, I did the second half first. I'm gonna be jacked up.
Wow.
And so,
Especially perhaps would you agree that like people that join the temple and live in the temple, ashram life, that's sort of a push to
yes,
dismantle
of course.
the ego.
That's what it was.
Brahmachari
That's what it
life.
was speaking to me because I was in the ashram for 13 years and I read this book right after I had my dramatic exit from the ashram, and then I was just like, oh
That
my.
needs a sound effect.
Traumatic exit from the ashram.
Well, yeah, that's frankly the experience. And then this book was suggested to me after, and so that's why I kind of use the word relinquish. That I do get a sense that, we're all in our different trajectories in our spiritual development, and maybe maybe we were trying to do the first half too hard too soon. Like for devotees, we're doing that. The two are happening kind of concurrently. But when you're in one stage of your life, one emphasis is kind of there, and then when you're at another stage of your life, kind of Varnashram is brilliant. There's time for things.
Right. Right.
And maybe we went to the second half too hard, and now we're kind of experiencing the consequences. Maybe when you have leadership that isn't prepared to let go of such a critical identity that has supported them for so long. I mean, when I left the ashram, I was bewildered for a few years because you have one identity that works so well for you for so long, and you thought that was going to be your identity throughout life. And then all of a sudden, it's like the rugs pull underneath your feet, and you're just completely bewildered. You have no standing in any sphere, and you're not spiritual, because then you realize like, oh, my inner life isn't that deep yet, and neither you have an ego to which to function with, and it's a very traumatic experience. And maybe someone doesn't want to cross that threshold and deal with that the trauma that comes from actually having to break that down and move forward. Anyway, sorry for again going on. It's just
Please don't apologize.
A lot of these ideas.
That's why you're here. But I had a thought while you were just to pick up on this word support, that ego is supportive of sort of a feeling of security, at least for the term that it lasts.
Right.
And I was just thinking that one other issue about having a role that you have for many, many years is that often there's a practical support that offers people, either a position, money, place to live,
Resources.
certain kind of respect and resources. And I think when you're at closer to the latter or the end part of your life and section of your life, it can be very frightening or daunting at the least to relinquish that, because our society doesn't have a very great history of looking after people when they no longer have a position of respect, or and I sometimes I wonder about that, because I see there's situations where people get institutionalized, not necessarily because they're not necessarily because it's like a power trip or they just don't want to hand it off, but it's like they joined as a teenager perhaps, or very young, and they literally will have there's no other like role for them in society. Maybe they don't want to live in Vrindavan and just live in a room somewhere. Maybe they want to, where will they go? Not everybody has a family, or I'm not thinking about anyone specifically, but I've noted that for many people that are in that senior kind of role and time of their life.
Yes, I had a conversation with a friend regarding sannyas, even that. So how do people get sannyas nowadays, or even as a few years ago? It's that if you've like kind of lived long enough and you haven't got married and you're still a brahmachari, or you're kind of like, you can take sannyas, but is that the qualification to take sannyas? You have to get
recommendation, no?
Yeah, you have to get recommended, but
that's like the technical parts. But what about the like inner life part?
Exactly. Is there a measurement of that in any way, or is it just that you've been around long enough? Because we do see some sannyasis with mental issues. Right. And they've taken sannyas, but now it's like they've had disciples now, but they're getting older and they're not doing well mentally, and it's like I don't know how that related what we were talking about.
I can't speak to the modern sannyas situation. I have no comment about that, but in general, like if you shall take it from Shastra, the sannyasi, especially the devotionally oriented sannyasi, they have been able to let go of the various egos of this world that would bind them.
Socially dead,
and social suicide.
Right.
And they're able to relinquish the security of those egos, because that's what we were bringing up, how it creates a certain support and security, and then depend solely and wholly on Krishna. And as devotees, we're also in a sense called to that same level of renunciation, because to be a devotee is also to be renounced in that sense. Yeah. And Prabhupada, especially in Prabhupada's movement, he didn't make like a hard line between grihastas and sannyasis. And even the way the movement was manifest, everyone was a preacher. Everyone lived in the center at one point. Yeah. And he expected the grihastas to have the same standards of practice as any renunciate in the movement.
He said that's the real. Didn't he have a comment that that's the real sannyas, or was it brahmacharya? Like within grihastha ashram, it's not much different. The container may be different, and
Right.
but the expectation is just as high. And
Right.
It's very different from like Srila Bhakti Siddhanta's movement, where we hear like in the Gaudiya Math, if you're a grihastha, well, just don't let the beads get cold, you know?
Right.
Whereas if you were a sannyasi or a brahmachari, 64 rounds. That was like a
Right.
very hard line.
Interesting.
And Prabhupada's movement, that wasn't that hard line.
Very interesting.
And we inherit that even by osmosis because we grew up in the community.
Yeah.
So we all feel that we got to be at that standard. And in a sense, if we have any interest in pure devotion and going back home, back to Godhead, then we do have to be at that standard where we're able to turn our backs on the egos of this world, whatever they may be.
Yeah.
And, experience the trauma of that, experience maybe even a lack of security in that position, and knowing that Krishna will hold me, he will capture me, and he will bring me back home, back to Godhead. And I think that creates so much tension, like on an individual level, to know that. And I think most devotees do know this, even if they haven't studied Shastra and maybe really gotten that angle of vision. It's by osmosis in our ethos. That's the understanding. Like we're at some point to do that. And it's obviously extremely, it's a high call.
It's a high bar.
Yeah, it's a high bar.
yeah,
And I guess this kind of humanizes the experience of being in a leadership position. Because I think our generation could be a little harsh also, pointing at the leaders and saying they're not doing this and not doing that. And I always, oftentimes when I hear that from our peers and so on, I'm like, well, you're about to get your chance. Let's see how it goes.
I know, right?
Because I hear you talking all this smack now, but wait until you get your chance, And I having the experience of like, I remember like being at the Bhakti Center and not knowing what the leaders are going through. Like you really don't know what the leaders are. And even if they tell you, you don't know because experience is very subjective. I think there was an article that you can, even if I explain it to you, you will never know what it's like to be a bat. There was an article written by some philosopher. Like the subjective experience of actually being a bat, you will never understand, even if I explain it from all angles. And I think it's the same for any position in this world. And I remember, leadership is doing something. You're like kind of bewildered body, finding fault, pointing fingers. And then you get the chance for leadership on like a very small thing. And then you're like, I'm like ready to go to the store, buy a shotgun. It's so extremely demanding and frustrating and hard. And so our generation can be a little bit hard, not knowing that, not ourselves having gone through the process of having to let go at a certain point. Like we're not doing that. We're trying to build up our egos as much as possible and build up that sense of security. That's what the stage of life we're at.
Yeah.
And we don't have like traditional rites of passage, even for youth that used to be there to help us get a sense of the sort of sacrifices that will have to be made in greater ways in the future. We don't have any of that anymore either. And so we don't know what it's like.
what would that have been?
Like, for example, in traditional, because I'm reading this book about rites of passage and so on. In traditional cultures, you would have like, let's say at least for boys, they would be snatched from their, let's say, parents at a very young age, as a part of the rite of passage. Now you have to become an adult. And you will be taken away from the security of your mother's home, your mother's breast, and you're brought to some place and amongst all the men. And then maybe some hardship is given to you. Maybe some calculated wound is offered to you as part of the rite of passage of the new territory that you have to embody in this new stage of your life. And that's just like for the conventional life. That's not even for something spiritual. There were like these rites of passage that help you to transition into embodying something that was needed for that next stage of your life. So we don't have stuff like that anymore. I mean, traditionally, and I guess in our tradition, you would call them samskaras. And they're like these little tiny rites of passages, and I guess they're supposed to get bigger and bigger as you go along, all the way up to the last sacrifice.
Well, we don't have much between the childhood ones and marriage.
Right.
There's not, well, at least there probably are, but they're not really conventionally by the broader society.
No, they're not,
So without those rites of passage, we don't have a deep sense of the level of sacrifice that needs to happen to embody something higher. And then you're coming to this like high level of sacrifice where you have to just now give up all the ego, all the security that comes with that, all the fun and the laughs and all of that has to be given up in a sense, or sacrificed for the greater good of, communion with God, or whatever, however it wants to be articulated. We don't have that sense. And so it's easy for us to judge from this position about what's going on up there and find fault. And I'm always like, well, we're about to get our chance.
That's a very true.
All,
I'm guilty of that. I'm guilty of that. I don't criticize, but I'm very like critical. I'm critical of the. I don't know if my chance is coming. I feel a little bit jaded, to be honest, by the whole thing. Like I'm like, yesterday I was 25, and now I'm gonna be 35.
Yeah.
Like my life is just going.
Right.
Like, do I have time to like get involved in like, managing or getting, because I see people who are involved in that. It's like, it's kind of like a diversion. It's like a distraction in a sort of way, I feel.
Yeah.
Like
Sure.
a distraction from like the internal work that needs to be done to perfect oneself if your goal is Krishna consciousness, like pure Krishna, pure bhakti.
Yeah.
Do you think that perhaps is also that maybe we may feel that we're not seeing the example of how to balance those two?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
We've seen so many people that are parents or leaders or people that they like push extremely hard for many, many years.
Yeah.
And then they're sort of making comments like, yeah, I never really had time to read Prabhupada's books and haven't really had time to, go on pilgrimage, or like there's just things which it's not a criticism. It's sort of an appreciation of their hard work, but it's a little sad because it's like maybe that wasn't such a balanced way of approaching it. I don't know. I'm wondering if that's, we may look and be like, well, I don't want to be that, unbalanced in my life. And for many people also, there's like in your position now, you have a family, you have a growing family. It's like, I have these bills to pay. Like there's only a certain amount of headspace I have outside of the everyday concerns to invest in, managing something where it may be a thankless task. People may be just criticizing me anyway. And, it's not always that appealing, I think, for
it's
young
not.
people.
It's not. But, I think if I don't do it, or if you don't do it, someone will do it.
I think that's one of the big issues that comes up. That
What do you mean?
You're saying that's a good thing.
Yeah, that someone will do it. I'm like, how do you know?
Right.
What if I'm thinking exactly like you?
Right.
And everyone else is thinking exactly like that?
Yeah.
That someone will
It could
do
be
it,
true.
and then no
Could
one
be
will
true.
do it.
Or someone will do it, but is that the someone that you would want to do it?
That's true.
It's like sometimes you're like, okay, who's going to come forward? And one person comes with, no, anyone but that person. But that's the only person that's willing to do it.
Yeah, no, it's true.
I've heard
But
of-
I was saying it in the way of someone will do it, meaning like if we have faith in Krishna and Prabhupada and that the movement will continue forward. You know?
I obviously think about this a lot too.
Really?
And, well, of course, it affects the balance of inner and outer life, the responsibility to ourselves and the responsibility to others. That's the issue. And it seems to me in Prabhupada's movement, he kind of presented the responsibility to the outside world, whether it's our community or the greater family of humanity. He presented that preaching basically as part of the inner life cultivation.
Yes.
And that's definitely been the thrust of the Iskcon preaching, that by preaching your inner life, and perhaps we haven't always seen evidence for that. Like we don't always see. I remember like when I joined the movement, and I did book distribution for about 7 or 8 years. And I remember the devotee who trained me in book distribution, he was saying things like, if you're a book distributor, you're beyond the GBC, you're automatically on the transcendental platform. Like he was saying all this stuff to me. And I was just like, I don't know. I kind of got some doubts. And then I would see, maybe seasoned book distributors for many years. And maybe I wasn't as inspired. Like, is this what I want to be when I get to their age? So maybe we don't always see evidence for how the preaching has helped the inner life. And therefore, we're a little suspicious about it. But Prabhupada's presentation of his movement has always been that by helping the greater family, then you help yourself. And I do have experience of that, like even when dealing with the men's issues, for example, by investigating that, I was inspired to investigate those things because I wanted to help out. And in doing so, I'm helping myself tremendously. I'm learning so many things about myself, so many things about what I have to do as an individual if I want to go deeper. So in helping others, it's had the inverse impact. Is that the right way of saying that? Where I've been also benefited.
Yeah.
And I do get a little concerned because I guess I get concerned when I see like a too hard of a line drawn between the inner and outer life, because I guess my concern comes that, well, I guess this has been in my mind for the last few weeks, but whereas people get so like immersed in their outer responsibility, the world of their ego. So like, you know, whatever, my family, my children, my job, my politics, my whatever it might be.
Yeah.
That not only are they neglecting the inner life, but they're neglecting to make the sacrifice for the greater family. Now in traditional Vedic culture, even if you were involved in like household affairs, there was, you know, Panchamahayagya. So that there were like duties that you had that were related to the outside environment, the duty to the devas, to the rishis, to the other human beings, to the other animals, to the
Forefathers.
The forefathers.
Yeah.
And that was part of your life. That's not a part of the modern life. So the modern life is just you and in your world of ego, your ego world. You know, so me and my wife and my kids and my job. And well, what about Panchamahayagya? At least there should be Panchamahayagya, you know? And I'm not seeing that. So they're neither they're growing internally, neither they're helping the greater family. And so that doesn't seem like a very viable option to grow on any level, spiritually or conventionally. And so if you draw like if we as devotees draw too hard of a line between them, like I tend to draw a harder line also, but if we draw too hard of a line, we either end up, you know, in the inner life, we're not trying to cultivate that, and also just not doing well in that area
Either, right?
We were at Bangladesh, and I shared a post about this. It was it had like a dark image of me and this Thomas Merton quote. The quote was something like, if you've gone to the moon and back but have not like traveled through the great abyss within yourself, then what have you done? And that spoke to me when I was in Radhadesh. Radhadesh is beautiful. The kirtan, the mellows was awesome. Then everyone leaves Tuesday. Hello. like no one's around, you know? And devotees are kind of like in their silos. And it was like extremely intense to be kind of by yourself. I wasn't by myself. I was with a friend, luckily, but I was close enough to the isolation to get a sense that, wow, I don't have that much of an inner life. Like we always imagine, if I had this kind of space, I could really go deep.
Yeah, do some deep bhajan.
You'll do some deep bhajan and then fall away from Krishna consciousness. And so
I'm gonna do some deep bhajan. Then the next scene is like falling asleep.
So there is a connection between, there's something to the idea by helping others, you help yourself, and a way of balance, using our energy to help the greater family so that we can become deeper individuals. I'm experiencing that with the men's groups a little bit. And I think the part of the Panchamahayagya was to kind of bridge that gap between inner and outer life. And anyway, sorry, I'm kind of rambling here at this point, but
that's the third time you apologize.
I can't help it because, you know, I got all these things in my head and I'm trying to get them out.
It's great. Yeah, where's the Panchamahayagya thing from?
The Vedas.
Okay.
And I mean, of course, it's not like I read the Vedas, but it's brought up in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita when the principle of yajna is mentioned. And chapter 3, verse 10 through 16. And so in the commentaries of our acharyas, they bring up the Panchamahayagya, like this was imperative for all, particularly grihastas.
I wonder how that's reflected in nowadays life.
Well, like in our Iskcon family, or
I don't know. I think it's reflected in just general population, mainstream culture, because you see that there's not as much regard or understanding for elderly people, and there's not that sort of cultural sort of conventions which everyone's is following. Like it's maybe not the best example, but just in Radhadesh at this Kirtan festival, we were just noting that sometimes the festival is so big, so many people trying to fit inside this hall, and you sometimes see elderly people, or not elderly, but older people that want to come in, and there's a bank of chairs at the back.
Yeah.
and you see like young people sitting in the chairs and not really having a thought. Like, here is a person, they're standing there.
Yeah.
You know, some of them are people who even have, you know, position with temple leadership, things like that, not offering the chair. I mean, I saw it multiple times, which is why
Wow.
it spoke to me. And I was thinking, what's sort of missing in that culture? Because I think at least with my generation, it was sort of impressed upon us that you have to have that kind of respect for someone who's older. And I mentioned it to a few people, and they were like, yeah, but it's not really the culture anymore. And I was like, well, that's what is it that
Like, it was just
big
like,
of that big of a difference in just, you know, a couple of decades.
Yeah.
But I think it's reflected by, you know, we're not living within a bubble. Like, there are, you know, religious communities like the Amish or Bruderhof. Their culture is very it's very, you know, refined and established for so many years within their own community. But we are also, because we are sort of a preaching movement, we are engaging and we're living in the world. We're engaging with the world. We're, you know, whether it's for preaching or whether it's for, you know, watching YouTube or whatever, we're engaging with things. So naturally we get affected by the culture of just broader society. And I think you do see that playing out. People have an instinct to be, you know, philanthropists and, you know, give to charities and things, but I don't think it's always the sort of clarity is there of exactly like, what is my responsibility as a human being, you know, to something like the environment, you know, what is my anyway, it's a bigger topic, but
it is. It just reminded me of how in the devotee community specifically, how this plays out is, well, I'm chanting Hare Krishna, so I'm free from the obligations to the devas and the rishis and
Yeah, right.
you know, Devarshi who tapped in there Nam Prachiranam and this verse is quoted. And it's like, really, because you're chanting Hare Krishna. Well, how much Hare Krishna are you chanting versus how much YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all these things you're using?
Yeah.
And it's, like the yagya to the rishis is to study the literatures. The yagya, you know, to the forefathers was to have children. You know, again, there's this kind of obligation to the outside, which was also meant to help you move progressively inside, even if it was slow, by slow degrees. And we don't have that so much anymore. So if we're not going to preach, and we don't have the support of a like Karma Kandya culture, which obliges you to do Panchamahayagya or something like that, then what are you doing? Then you're just kind of absorbed in your own ego, informed by your own raga and dvesha.
Yeah.
And you're not helping the greater family, and you're also not going anywhere.
Man, you make me feel bad about myself.
Jai, my preaching is successful. They used to say like that, unless your preaching is making people feel uncomfortable, it's not very good. We used to say like that in the ashram.
Really?
Yeah, because truth is like a little pinching, truth is confronting.
Yeah.
I don't mean to make anyone feel bad. I mean, these are thoughts that I'm thinking about myself, you know, because I definitely have this spirit of like, you know what, give the finger to the outside world, and I'm just gonna retreat and do my own thing. And I'm like,
That's what I am thinking.
but I'm like, that doesn't. I haven't seen that to be a good strategy for myself. Whenever I've gotten the chance to be by myself for long periods of time,
Yeah.
I'm like, this is not a good idea. At least where I'm at right now internally, this is not a good idea. So I need to figure out how I'm going to engage with the outside, where I can still, you know, at least by slow degrees, improve on the inside also.
I think if someone has good association, and at the same time they're working on the inside, you know, have a guide or guides, and then they're also working on their internal life, I think that's very powerful, as opposed to what you were saying, how you're just being on your own somewhere in the forest or something. I strive for that sometimes, but it's hard to find good association as well.
yeah, I think that's been the thrust behind things like mentorship systems, where
Yeah.
and you know, sangha groups, and just sort of formalized circles and gatherings, so that there's a scheduled way that you're having a certain association, because it's difficult, especially in modern life. You know, the proximity that people live to each other is not really like village life, or even, you know, like close community. And even to have qualified guides, like, you know, people may have a guru but not hardly ever see them. They may not really have someone that's that much more spiritually kind of deep and evolved than them, that they really feel I can just look up to this person. I can accept whatever instruction or guidance they're going to give me. And so I think that can be really challenging.
What communities do we see like that really working, like mentorship and a real strong community?
I mean,
was England like that?
No,
Manor was like that?
I don't see that many communities, so I can't.
Yeah. I think the Manor has really a lot going for it. It's really an amazing
Oh, totally
project
amazing.
and place in so many ways. I think the scale of it, my dad always, talks about this, that they say that with community, once you get past 150 people, that it kind of is not really a community anymore. It's not possible for a person to relate with in an intimate way more than 150 people.
Right, right.
So the size of the so-called congregation is just so vast now, that my experience of it as a child is quite different than what it is now. And I think many people will say they feel it's impersonal. They feel nobody knows who I am. I don't really have that. We don't have any community anymore. It's not like a family. Things like that. So I think there's always, and then I've heard it spoken of as the Bhaktivedanta Manor is like the great cathedral. It's a place of pilgrimage. You shouldn't look at it as a place to get community, but you need to also invest in, there's sort of small community hubs that you have to, like, whether they be Sangha groups or
Bhakti Vrikshas
or other types of, communities form around certain service groups, like the Harinam you used to go on the weekend, that goes on there every weekend.
Yeah, that's great.
That forms a little community. Like we go out there every weekend and like that. So, I mean, I've traveled a lot over the years, and I guess I've seen many places where it seems like there are very positive things going on, but I'm not sure if I've seen a place where I'm like, oh, they've got everything, and I guess that's probably to be expected. There's no perfect situation, but there's places that have things that are very, they're compelling. Whether, I mean, there's only, everyone can't live there anyway, like then it wouldn't be what it is. There's an intimacy of the experience that is needed in order to feel that it's personal.
I was gonna say I would just throw in there that I think any community or whatever space where the Sankirtan is going on, because Sankirtan is ultimately the reconciler of all the discrepancies that we're going to be encountering in the age of Kali.
Right.
What is that? Kaler Dosho Nidirajan. So I don't think we should expect any less of a I don't know if I should, any less of a shit show.
Right.
It's going to be there. This is the age of Kali.
Yeah.
I'm personally deeply inspired by Bhakti Center because we have our most successful programs there are our Kirtan programs.
Right.
And what I find very amazing, even my first time visiting Bhakti Center, was to see 3/4 of the participants in Kirtan on our famous Thursday night Kirtan are just New Yorkers.
Yeah.
They're not, and they're not into yoga necessarily or meditation. They're not spiritual,
Not
religious,
hippies.
not hippies. Just like New Yorkers. Some of them got business suits on. We once had a gangster come in with a teardrop underneath the eye. Like, when I sat down, I was like, like one of those. And to see like 3/4 of just New Yorkers engaging in the Yuga Dharma and feeling some sort of community just by the engagement of Sankirtans, feeling some sort of communion, either with their own true nature or with Krishna, with the Supreme Being. And so I haven't seen that many communities to make a comment about, do I see any communities? But I am inspired by communities where I see the Sankirtan is going on, because ultimately that's the reconciler of the discrepancies we will be encountering. And so there should be more and more Sankirtan wherever we are.
It's the life essence of...
Exactly.
Yeah.
I don't think that we emphasize that in a way where it's like becomes our, like you're saying, that's our main thing.
I'm thinking of the Iskcon Silicon Valley, Vaisheshika Prabhu's, temple, where it's just like it's so deeply ingrained within the culture of the community that Sankirtan this is what we do.
Yeah.
Everybody gets, I mean, I believe, I haven't actually been there, but to my understanding, that's primarily through book distribution, but also Harinam, I imagine.
Yeah.
And it seems to be so vibrant and like dynamic. I'm sure nowhere is perfect, but it's really compelling to see a place like that, because it's very, very inspiring when you come amongst a group of people who are all, wanting to do that together. And I think for myself, I've probably experienced the most personal, moments of, I can't say if they're transformative. They have been transformative because they've set a bar where I'm hankering after that experience again, where you communally are chanting together, serving together in that way through Sankirtan. Even, the Bhakti Center, I would agree, it's incredible actually what goes on. And I think, because I was also living there for a period of time, and you do get used to it, and then you kind of take it for granted.
Right.
Oh my
and then
God.
I go
Totally.
and then I go to other places, and I talk about the Bhakti. They're like, "Oh, what is it like?" And I say, "Yeah, there's 120 to 150 people come for Thursday night kirtan." And they're like, "What? That's like an incredible number." And they're not just sort of congregation members. They're people that, we would normally be somewhat amazed if even one of them is saying, I'm interested to kind of learn more. What to speak of sitting in the kirtan and, really getting something from it.
Yeah.
So I do have a lot of faith in that, and I personally desire to see depth amongst myself and my peers in both deepening our own connection with the holy name, with Shastra, to the point where it's a very natural inspiration that we want to share it. It's not like something forced, like, oh, you should be preaching, so you should go get yourself out on the street.
Yeah.
When you have a genuine experience, it feels like, yeah, of course, Like we had some Harinams in New York in the time that I was there, where
Washington Square or something, right?
Yeah, Washington Square, or we just decided, all right, we're just gonna go out, and we would just go down, and it was just so joyful, and I was like, this is so much fun. These are people that I love, I'm friends with, we're doing this together. Yeah. And we get back, we like feel our hearts full, Yeah. And then I'm like, okay, I can understand how you can actually, you make progress, you're also sharing something, you're bonding in relationship with people, and it tests you in a certain way, but it's also joyfully performed.
It's very hope-giving, actually, to hear you guys say that. Like for example, like you're talking about becoming deeper in Shastra and thing, and then JayaJagannath, you're just like a young person who a lot of people look up to as being, who is very studious, and who reading Shastra and learning Shastra is cool because of you. People look up to you like that. Am I right?
Yeah.
So people like you guys are what is going to change Iskcon, I think.
I think you also, the breadth of reach of this podcast, it's starting, I think it initiated something in our community where more devotees thought, like, this is a great idea. People are tuning in and learning. We're all kind of like these sort of natural leaders in that sense.
Yeah, and I hope that we can, continue to inspire others, and also, but do it in a very genuine way, because that's what people see, I think. Like when they see you, talking about Bhagavatam, it's like very genuine. It's not like something fake, And I think that's very important, that we are all genuine in our own ways to inspire others, because people can see that immediately. When it's not genuine.
When it's not genuine, I always say Super Soul's in their heart too. He'll just tip them off. Fake, he's fake.
Right. I'm personally inspired by. I think that we sometimes look at the previous generation who primarily joined temples and lived in the temple, and we were like, oh, well, we don't really have the experience that they did because they were like in the fire together.
Yeah, they saw
Like,
Prabhupada.
it's like
Prabhupada.
the army people, you know, they're
Right,
like
right.
back in Nam, we did this together. And
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
That
The
bond is
trenches.
formed. Yeah, we were in the trenches together. But I think what we have is something different, but it equally there's a beauty to it. We have, amongst so many of us, very natural and real friendships. There's an honesty that's very refreshing, and there's a trust. You know, we're willing to trust each other and kind of go on this journey together. What self-realization collectively, we want to help each other, and I think it's very powerful. Like I think when people come to something like the Thursday night kirtan or whatever it may be, even someone watching this podcast today, listening, we are friends, you know, and we're really sincerely, we talk about these things, not just, you know, just for fun, but because we care, because we want to find the answers. And that, for instance, when people come to Thursday night kirtan, I think they're looking, and you're seeing Vaishnav Sangha. This is something I also want to be part of. These friendships are deep. They have a spiritual basis. So I think if we can strive for that more, you know, just genuine, real relationships. For most of us, we can manage, you know, just a few of those. It's to really invest in them.
Yeah.
But there's a real power there. And then whenever that time comes to inherit, you know, whatever it may be, you've been investing in that which strengthens and supports you as an individual. You have those people you can go to, and what do you think about this? And, you know, there's that network of support. And then I think, although it may be very daunting and very scary, we'll be feeling a little more empowered to do whatever may be the need of the hour.
Definitely. Going back to Iskcon Silicon Valley, I don't know if you guys heard my podcast with Chaitanya Nanda. It was the one before this. Yeah. I think that what's important is what ties it all together is Vaisheshika Prabhu for that community. He's like a very genuinely Krishna conscious person.
He's on fire.
He's on fire.
Inspired.
He's so fired up, and he just wants to like fire everyone else up.
He's like
I've mentioned him on every podcast, by the way.
He's just like shining. Like you just feel when you're around him. You're like,
Totally.
wow.
If you're listening, Prabhu, I know he listens to this podcast. We really
We love
appreciate
you.
Yeah. But going back to that, I think it is like a leader, a genuine leader, is what's lacking.
Well, speaking to Chaitanya Ananda's point, and your podcast also, at least as I was kind of understanding the feeling of it, we can't just wait for the genuine leader to emerge.
Right.
He was kind of speaking to basically to us becoming those leaders, and I think his point was that you may not have like the charismatic leader necessarily, but somehow you may be, by Prabhupada's language here, the tricks of chance.
Right.
You find yourself in such a position,
Yeah.
and you'll be called. If you happen to find yourself in such a position, you're basically called to make the deeper level of sacrifice that you would not have on your own done. I'm immediately thinking of Parikshit Maharaj in the chapter 19 of the first canto, when he says that the Lord has kindly come before me in the form of a curse of a Brahmin boy.
Wow.
Because out of fear, I would break my attachment to the household and thus go and commune with Krishna. So basically, if you find yourself in such a position by Krishna's arrangement, tricks of chance, then you're basically being called to emerge anew. Like, okay, I let you play around in this sort of spirit for some time. I held space for you for that time. Now I'm asking you to respond to my kindness to you in that period of your life, to make this deeper level of sacrifice for me and for my movement and so on. And so in that sense, I think we have to come into the reality that we may be forced into that position as such, forced by Krishna.
Yeah.
And not be weary about it or scared of it when it comes before us. Again, because of the friendships, we can reach out to one another
Give each other
and give each other courage.
Yeah.
Totally.
Like, yes, serve Krishna. That's the best chance for you. That's the best chance for the society. And I forgot what I was bringing. Well, just not waiting for leaders. Leadership will definitely emerge.
I think if it's a person's, it's sort of destined also. Certain people, they're not aware but they emerge as leaders
Right.
because of their actions and their
Yeah.
self-reflection. But I'm also I was thinking of a certain few things in that happened in my life, because I definitely didn't see myself in that way, and I still don't in a way, although I accept that as I grow older and I'm doing things in a certain way, people are looking at me and saying,
Sure.
well, you are a leader.
Yeah.
And I remember having a conversation with my dad where he was saying, you're a leader, and I was like, well, I don't want to be a leader. I didn't designate myself to be a leader. And he said, it doesn't matter what you want or think, but you are, because when people are following you, then you're a leader, whether you intended that or not.
Yeah.
So that's one thing. But I'm also thinking of a time when one devotee, wonderful devotee, Shonaka Rishi Prabhu, it's like a mentor for me. I remember he's always been sort of, I think this is a key role that I wish that many more of our senior devotees play. That he's always been sort of watching my journey and in key moments feeding in things. So I remember one time we were at a kirtan festival, and he had popped there to Birmingham to the kirtan festival, and I led a kirtan, and I'd just over those years been getting a bit more comfortable leading kirtan, but it was still something I felt quite nervous about. And he said to me, he said, you have this like Shakti, that it's like people want to hear from you. They want to hear from you. But he was saying, don't think that it's just singing. People are going to want to hear what you have to say. So you better have something to say.
Wow.
He said, you better have something of substance to say. So get ready for that.
Wow.
He said, you should be giving class. And I was like, no, I don't do that,
Yeah.
And he was like, no, you should. And he kept pushing me on that for years. It was years. He would always mention it. And then the day I got initiated, he said to my spiritual master, so tell her on the day, now that she's initiated, she has to start giving class.
Wow.
And I mean, it's just, I appreciate that, because it always felt like too much, but at the same time, it's like, we also don't know what we're capable of.
Yeah.
And you need those people that believe in you to say, like, you can do this. And an environment of encouragement. Like I found during my time at the Bhakti Center, there really was that spirit of just try it, just have a go, and you'll be all right. And, we'll grow together like that, which I think
Together, that's the key. It's a team effort.
Sankirtan.
Sankirtan.
It comes back to this
Yeah.
Sankirtan.
Team effort.
principle.
Do you feel inspired now?
I do. That was really good. The past 10 minutes have been very inspiring for me. We have to do it all together. Oh yeah, right. But that's the ending. That's the ending thing. That's okay. That's okay. I feel inspired hearing all this, because it's sometimes we feel like we have to try to fix things or do things on our own. But it's not the case, we can do it together. Like we're talking about it right now, like, and you made a good point. We all have great friends and who are qualified in different ways to help us, give us good advice, whether it be about your life or about spiritual things or about Iskcon or about sadhana or Shastra, whatever it is. We all have friends that we can turn to, and that's such a blessing.
Yeah,
That's a real blessing.
you guys reminded me. I was thinking of writing a post on my gram on this idea, a quote. I was thinking of a way to phrase it, but one of the biggest lies we tell ourselves is that we're human, because that's a lie that gives us a pass for a lot of frailty also.
Right.
So we like that particular lie, but along with that lie comes this other one, that we are alone.
Right.
And that we have no support.
Yes.
And basically with the first lie, that I'm human, we severely downplay our potential.
Yes.
And think, I can't do this, I can't do that, and therefore we don't. Once you've decided that you can't do something, then you won't do it. So that's the first lie, prevents us from stepping up when we could easily do it. We have more than enough power to do it, but we downplay our potential. And then by saying, echoing the lie that we're alone, we don't get the necessary support to help to tell us that actually you can do this, you can charge forward, Krishna will catch you. And Prabhupada's movement is so amazing to me, because he'll ask, maybe it was Satsarup Maharaj started a magazine, and Prabhupada, but I've never done it before. I don't know. Krishna will help you. You know, there's so much of the Prabhupada memories where the boys were going to Prabhupada. Prabhupada, should I go to art school to learn how to do this better? Don't worry, Krishna will help you. You know, there may be a Dadami Buddhi Yogam Tam verse or something Prabhupada would drop. And but when you're feeling alone and kind of alienated, which a lot of devotees, we tend to feel that way, especially if we're living far away from Sangha and so on, then you don't have access to all this knowledge. You have your knowledge is there, but in critical moments, you tend not to have access to it. You know, and you need someone, you know, you need the Krishna telling Arjuna, you know, that actually, remember this, that's your potential and you have this power.
Right.
And yeah, if we can somehow smash those lies within ourselves, we may be able to do more for ourselves and also for the community.
Like they're going in a train or something, and Prabhupada's there, and they're like, okay, Prabhupada's like, okay, get out, and now start a temple.
Right.
I'm like, we're in the middle of nowhere. I don't have anything. He's like, don't worry about it. You got it. Like, go
Krishna
for
will
it.
help you.
He also said there's an anecdote with I think it was, I believe it was Govinda Dasi, but it might have been somebody else, that they were having to transcribe Prabhupada's, you know, tapes. She didn't know how to type.
Oh, right.
And he said, you just, you don't worry, you will learn. And he said, just recite the Om Jnana Timirandasya, and, you know, the spiritual master will help you. And she said she learned like that, you know, like normally you don't learn so fast to touch type. And I've heard that Yamuna Devi would often quote that to anyone. She would tell them, you know, that prayer is so important. Pray to the acharyas, because we think maybe it's another, you know, fallacy that we think they're somewhere else. They're not right here, right now. I can converse with them. I can pray to them and pray for that help.
Right.
And that when you sort of put your faith in that, you see that actually it's quite amazing what the response can be, and then faith grows that actually I'm not alone. There's this whole, you know, sky of stars of everybody's
Very
giving
nice.
their blessings.
That's very nice. I feel super inspired. I don't know if I'll do anything about it, but at this moment in time, I feel very inspired. And I hope our listeners are feeling inspired.
I'm feeling inspired too.
Yeah?
Yeah, I'm also feeling inspired.
What keeps you going, like, day to day?
Well, okay.
Was that a hard question?
It isn't. I don't want to give something like Stan, like I read Shastra every day, and it just sounds so like
Serious.
dry.
Srila Prabhupada's mercy.
Yeah, so like you can't connect to it. I think what keeps me alive every day is the fact
Cheerios.
I do like Cheerios. I do. I don't think it's the Cheerios though, but I do like them. I think what keeps me alive every day is that I do quite a bit of sharing of whatever I am receiving or I have.
Right.
And that gives a lot of life. I have my online Bhagavatam classes. You know, I'm taking more ownership of the Tuesday night kirtan and Thursday night kirtan offerings that we do at the Bhakti Center. Whatever I write on my social media is not very shallow. I spend time like thinking about a subject matter and trying to articulate it the best way I can. And I think the constant like trying to give in these small ways is Vidya Vadu Jivanam. You know, that is also a type of kirtan, and it gives a lot of inspiration to carry on. I think that's what gives me life, honestly.
Pranachayar Sehe to Prachar.
Which verse is this?
One who Bhaktisiddhanta, I think, said it. One who has life, he can preach.
So I think that gives me life, actually. And then in order to do that service, I end up doing other things for myself, studying Shastra, trying to improve my japa, which could be a lot better. And I end up doing a lot of things for myself because I do find so much life from trying to give, even in these small ways.
Very nice.
It's nothing like a friend coming to you, you know, in let's say a time of need for counsel, and you being able to serve in that capacity, and realizing that with all the work that you've been doing is having some function in your friendships and the lives of others.
Right. What about you, Jahnavi?
I think similarly, I mean, I think sometimes I always feel like I'm not doing enough because I know I'm extremely fallible, you know, sort of prey to my own mind mostly. Like when I'm not engaged, I find that my mind is pretty overwhelming at times. And but when I'm connected with that activity of sort of my own study or exploration or experience, and then sharing it gives me so much inspiration and faith, because you just are directly seeing how it impacts the life of another. And it's a profound experience of actually having, like, I think we all want to live a life of meaning. We all want to be able to share something or serve someone in a way that's deeply meaningful.
Yeah.
And that really fulfills that, to share either knowledge or experience. I mean, for me, it mostly often takes the form of kirtan, and the things that people tell me, and they, come with tears in their eyes and tell me, and I trust that it's, they're being sincere. Most people, you may say it's sentimental, but for most people, they won't come and share something unless it's really something felt, and it's an experience. It's something in their daily lives. They're feeling a profound connection, and so there's that, and then there's also thinking about those devotees who really inspire me, who I see, and I think I just want to be more like that,
Right.
and I'm feel light years away from it, honestly, but I see it's possible because I can see an example of somebody that has, really navigated that path with a lot of courage and integrity and devotion. And in my lifetime, I see there's people who are like that. And so I think, well, it's possible for me at least to come farther along that path, and also to offer something in gratitude to them for their efforts, for their sacrifice, to try and do something myself. That keeps me going, because I think if I relinquish that, it just seems like what a waste, what a waste. It's not really grateful for what they've given. It's not grateful for the gift that I've received. So
I'm seeing a theme of sharing between you guys.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And I think also, like, for those of us, for instance, those staff that were staying in the Bhakti Center, the basis of the friendships and relationships between a lot of us, because we were all quite engaged with sharing in different ways, that sort of forms a basis of inspiration of how to do that better. We talk about it, like we often talk about just different things about that, whether it be specifically about specific events or activities, or just sharing on the journey of that. And it feels so much more substantial a type of exchange than like just sort of catch up about life, what are you inspired or not very inspired more likely about, and gossip and whatever it may be. It tends to be like conversation flows downward usually to get to there. But I find that when there's some dynamic thing that's going on, that we're all on board, that we want to do this, it elevates our interpersonal exchanges, and that gives life too, that gives inspiration. And I think there's then less inclination to what we often feel inclined to do, is sort of like engage as much as is necessary, or as much as it fulfill my need for like human connection. And then I retreat to my cave with my phone, or like just and sort of dull the dissatisfaction that's simmering inside, which I think we all have that experience. It's not like, I'm not trying to paint this picture that we're not like some heroes. I think we're sincerely having different experiences and trying to choose those ones that repeatedly that seem like, okay, that's where there's some juice there, we try that and it's not really working. So
Wow, that's great. Thank you. It's been an hour and a half. I think we're gonna end
enough.
here. Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you guys coming over here and doing this. I know it's been you're coming from far away, but I think this has value. People are gonna get some value from this conversation. I definitely did.
I did.
We
too,
really appreciate you. That's why
Thank
we're
you.
here.
Thank you.
I said it before, and I'm gonna say it again.
Oh gosh.
No, I really think that that platforms like this, conversations like this, are extremely impactful and powerful, and I think we or people in, different sort of peer groups and Sangha may be the kind of people that naturally feel compelled to have these kind of conversations or have the opportunity to. There's people that live in places where they don't really have many peers to talk to about these things. So we may just also take it for granted, like, okay, we have this, we'll go home and have this conversation at the lunch table, you know.
Yes.
But actually, to participate in this kind of dialogue on a much broader scale, I think we really, really need it. And it's
for sure.
And I don't see many other forums for it that are as powerful as this one. I mean, you've developed it for a while, and I think it's going to develop more and more.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think we even touched on some of the things we wanted to talk about. We kind of went in a certain direction, which was really good.
Yeah.
But we'd like to have you guys back again. We can, have this permanent studio space now, so it's great. But any closing comments or anything, Jaya Jagannath Prabhu?
I'm grateful for your friendship and for Johnny's friendship.
Oh, thank you.
And, my friendship with Johnny started, I guess, a little bit over 2 years ago, and I think you called it. I think you told Johnny that when you meet Jai, you guys are gonna hit it off.
Yeah.
And we did, and I think especially over a box of cereal. We were at this temple opening, and I was staying at one house, but I wanted to move into a house with Vera and Johnny. And so at the old house, they knew I wanted cereal for breakfast, but I only had one bowl. So I just took all the boxes of cereal with me when we were moving to the new house. But we had to put our stuff in the temple. So I came out of the car holding the boxes of cereal in my bag where we were going to. And Johnny was like, "Why are you holding a box of cereal?" And we had, the rest of that retreat was like a good laugh about that.
Nice.
And then our friendship really blossomed. I'm very grateful for Johnny's friendship and very grateful for your friendship. Also, we've been friends for a really long time now. I started with our trip to Nepal.
Yes, we went to Ayodhya.
Oh, yeah.
And we went to Nepal.
And we connected over Srila Sridhar Maharaj's Sri Guru and His Grace.
Yes. Oh, what a beautiful book. I need to get back into that.
So my closing remark is thank you for both of you.
Thank you. What about you, Jahnavi? Closing remarks.
Closing remarks. Well, I'm also very grateful for both of you, but I was just thinking that I was listening to a class recently by Sutapa Prabhu from London, and he said something that I really liked, which was he was saying that in our Krishna conscious or life pursuing bhakti, that we often have these very high ideals and these examples of people who are extremely evolved, and it can be very disheartening thinking that it's like, oh, I just give up. I'm never gonna, and there's not a sense of like what I can do, and I feel inspired. So he was making the point about just choose one small thing to do that you see as a step forward for yourself, but it's also very realistic. It's very attainable, and just do that, and you keep doing that. And I was just like, oh yeah, that really makes sense. I think we can all do that, and I get inspired when I see my friends doing things like that, and I know for myself that really helps me to see that there's a little small step I can take. And I mean, it's just an example I've been thinking about recently, but one of our friends, her father, he just took it upon himself for many years that he would bake cookies and offer them, and wherever he would go, he'd just have some cookies with him and give them, the neighbors, the kids in the community, the dentist, whoever. And that was just like his service, was prasad distribution in that very simple way. And I feel like that everyone is capable of doing something and getting inspired. You don't have to wait for somebody to ask you to do that or for any kind of position.
Yeah.
That's Prabhupada sort of offered us that opportunity to be inspired and be creative about the way of whatever we have to offer. So I guess that's a closing word,
Brilliant.
to say
Very nice.
I'm inspired to see what I think. Maybe people that hear this might want to write in and tell you things that they do. There's probably be really inspiring to hear about.
Sure, yeah. Just put it in the comments, guys. Let's hear what you what little steps you've taken.
What inspires you? What keeps you going?
Yeah, very good. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. That's episode 23 of the late morning program with Jahnavi and Jaya Jagannath. Have a great day, everyone.